Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. Qatar pulling out all the stops to welcome President Donald Trump with a fighter jet escort in the sky and Cybertrucks on the ground. The multi-billion-dollar deal he just struck on aviation, while questions are mounting over the luxury jet he was offered as a gift. Plus, extreme flooding turns roads into rivers and an elementary school campus underwater in another state. The only way out for dozens of students was by boat. And the ex-girlfriend of Sean Diddy Combs back on the stand today. We have her testimony painting a picture of violence, drug use, and freak-offs. But first, President Trump is on stop number 2 of his 3-stop tour of the Middle East. Today's visit, Qatar. The president escorted into that country by these Qatari F-15, there they are, F-15 fighter jets. And down on the ground, his motorcade was flanked by 2 Tesla Cybertrucks that led him through the streets of Qatar's capital city. Then there was this. Dozens of mounted camels and Arabian horses awaited the president at the Qatari palace. Wow. All of that as criticism mounts over this gift from Qatari leaders, a $400 million jet. Now, there are security and ethical concerns over this coming from both sides of the aisle, but Mr. Trump said he'd be stupid not to accept the jet to use as Air Force One. Now, the president making no mention of that so far today. He did, however, secure what the White House calls an economic exchange worth at least $1.2 trillion with the country. Let's start there with CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, who is live for us in Doha. Nancy, great to be with you. What more can you tell us about this commitment?
Well, the White House hasn't itemized all $1.2 trillion yet, Liz, but what we do know is that Qatar has plans to purchase airplanes and other kinds of technology from a variety of U.S. aerospace companies, including most notably Boeing, where they're going to be buying about $100 billion worth of airplanes, 160 planes that they say that they are going to be purchasing from Boeing. But there are other U.S. companies that are lining up as well, like Raytheon. Some of these deals had already been arranged before the president's visit, but they wanted to announce it all at once, make a big splash as President Trump tours the Middle East.
Okay, there's a lot of talk about planes, Nancy, but still no mention about that jumbo jet. What's the latest there?
Well, you haven't heard the president talking about it publicly here with the Emir of Qatar, who is the person who offered up that plane in the first place. But President Trump has been greeted very warmly by him, had lots of nice things to say about the Emir. President Trump has answered reporters' questions about it. He said that he'd be a fool to turn it down. He basically rejected the criticism by Democrats and many Republicans who say that it is simply not befitting of a president of the United States to be accepting something as pivotal as Air Force One from another country, let alone the Qataris. He says it is simply a gift, just like the U.S. gives gifts to other countries around the world. And so he's unfazed by the criticism, but he hasn't been talking about it publicly here in Qatar. He's been mostly focused on the investment deals that he has cut or that he wants to cut. And the plane itself, Liz, is not here in Qatar. It's actually already in the United States, where it would have to undergo months, if not years, of renovations and security upgrades in order to make it safe enough to serve as Air Force One. So even if this gift goes through, it's unclear how much time President Trump would actually get to fly in it before the end of his term.
And Nancy, it would cost a fortune just to get that plane, security, just to make it available to even be an Air Force One, right? That's taxpayer money.
Right.
Okay, so two more days left.
Exactly. And so the question becomes, if this is only going to be flown... Sorry, Liz, you're right that if the plane is only going to be flown for a year or two before it is gifted to the Trump Library, which is what White House officials are saying would happen, then you're right. It is a good question why all this money would be spent to retrofit it rather than focusing on the brand new Air Force Ones that are in development. They're certainly years behind schedule, but they are being worked on by Boeing, and those are not cheap either, as you can imagine.
No, they're not. And Nancy, 2 more days left in this Middle East tour. What else does the president have on his agenda?
Well, tomorrow he's going to be visiting an air base outside of Doha. He's going to be going there again with Qatari leaders. This is a crucial air base for the Americans. They have thousands of service members there. It's really a launching point for operations in the Gulf. And the president talked today about wanting to expand cooperation between the U.S. and Qatar. So they'll be talking about that. And the president said today he's going to be able to see some of the brand new wizardry and technology that Qatar has purchased. So there might be something of an air show tomorrow. And then he's off to Abu Dhabi for more conversations about investments that country, another oil-rich country, can make in the United States before he heads back to the U.S.
Quite the trip. Nancy Cordes live for us in Doha. Thank you so much, Nancy. Well, Sean Diddy Combs' former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, is back on the stand for a second day of testimony in Mr. Combs' sex trafficking trial. Ventura began her testimony yesterday describing in graphic detail years of physical and sexual abuse. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman is outside the courthouse in New York with the very latest. Katrina, what have we heard so far today?
Cassie is back on the stand. One thing that I think is notable is that Sean Combs' family is in court again today, but not any of his daughters, who were all there yesterday during this very graphic testimony. His mother and his sons are still in the courtroom. We've been learning more about his relationship with Cassie, more details about these freak-offs that they engaged in, the escorts who were involved, and the violence that was involved. She talked about it as a situation that she just didn't feel that she could get away from. When she was asked how many times he was violent with her, she said that it was too many to count. Yesterday, we had also heard about the drugs that were involved in these situations. Today, another thing that she admitted on the stand is that she had an on and off addiction to opiates during that period. But she is continuing to unfold the story of how she felt trapped into this relationship, into these freak-offs. She talked about the blackmail material that she also referenced yesterday and elaborated that these were videotapes of them during the freak-offs. She worried that they could ruin her career. She was embarrassed about anyone ever getting to see them. Her testimony is still continuing on the stand now.
Yeah, it was difficult to listen to, Katrina. And we understand you have details about a contentious moment that sparked between two parties today. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, so the judge had to call a ceasefire in court this morning between the two sides. It's a debate over exhibits, which may seem simple enough, but the defense doesn't want to have to turn over its marked exhibits to the prosecution ahead of time before these witnesses take the stand. They seem concerned that the government could prepare the witnesses for what the defense's strategy is, which they may be able to glean by looking at them. So they want to just be able to provide them right before cross-examination. The government says that doesn't give them enough time to review these, to potentially make challenges. This is something that they're still going to have to figure out, but for today, they're just going to turn those over right before the cross of Cassie Ventura. But this is very important for the strategies and the preparation of both sides, and it really was a very contentious moment in court this morning.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much. Our team continues to follow this trial from inside the courtroom today, and you can get all of their live updates by simply going to our CBS News website and scrolling through all the news that you may have missed. All right, extreme floodwaters are receding now in parts of Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. Heavy rain turned roads into rivers, flooding buildings, and even triggered rescue operations in some cases. That flooding led to a very tragic situation in Virginia, where search crews say they do believe they have found the body of a missing 12-year-old child who got swept up in those rushing floodwaters. Yesterday evening, 12-year-old Jordan Sims was walking outside when he was swept away by rushing water that had flown onto the road from a creek. This happened just outside of Charlottesville. Fire crews say they believe they found his body this morning and have suspended search operations. Meanwhile, in Western Maryland, about 150 students and 50 adults had to be evacuated from an elementary school yesterday in the city of Westernport. Floodwaters started rising so fast they reached the second flood area, trapping students and staff inside that school building. Fire crews had to use boats just to get them out. Now, Westernport hasn't seen this kind of flooding, at least having it be this bad, in almost 30 years. More than 4 inches of rain fell in just 24 hours. Multiple people were rescued from homes and cars. Luckily, no injuries have been reported. And the people tasked with responding to natural disasters like this dealt with their own flooding emergency. Westernport firefighters were stuck wading through water that started filling up their own fire station. All right, I want to bring in meteorologist Jessica Birch. Where is this storm system headed next?
You know, it's been impressive. We've seen rainfall totals really add up just into areas like Virginia, up into Maryland, and we're still watching more storms sweep throughout these communities. Today, it's tracking to the northeast and eventually pushing offshore, but there's still more where it came from. And as we head into the afternoon hours, we're still concerned about localized flooding. So I want to show you those communities that are dealing with that right now. We head over to the floor map, and I want to show you a couple of things happening. It's not just those communities, it's widespread throughout the states. We're dealing with some sort of active weather over into the Dakotas. We're seeing a similar trend. You head over into the northeast, we'll see more heavy bands of rain within the next 48 hours. This is a loop, though, so it's showing you the next 48 hours on cycle. I want to show you what happened just within the past 24 hours so far. States like Virginia saw anywhere up to around 9.5 inches of rain in those local inland communities, and we're still adding to that as we head into this afternoon throughout the next 24 hours as well. It's a soggy setup for us from New York stretched all the way down into the Carolinas. Another big concern with this, of course, we're seeing rain in the forecast, but thunderstorm activity is still possible, meaning we could see gusty winds, high wind speeds anywhere up to around 60 miles per hour at times. But to add to that, we're also keeping a close eye on lightning and hail, too, as these storms continue to track to the northeast. We'll get on and off showers in the forecast as we head into our Thursday morning forecast, anywhere up to around 2 additional inches of rain throughout those communities, from Norfolk all the way up into places like Delaware and New Jersey. Now, on the back end of that system, there's another area of low pressure way back over into the Midwest. This one has some different concerns. Of course, strong winds still, hail possible, and thunderstorm activity, but we could also see a chance for tornado activity from this one as we head into our Thursday and Friday forecast. So lots to break apart throughout the states. The Northeast, we're keeping a close eye on for localized flooding. We're also keeping a close eye on strong winds and a chance for tornadoes off into the Midwest.
A lot of extreme weather happening right now. All right, Jess, thanks. Well, a breaking development in the case of a Georgetown University scholar who is being held by ICE. Plus, a new study reveals that most Americans cannot afford basic costs of living. We're talking about education, childcare, even health care. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We are following breaking news. A judge has ordered the immediate unconditional release of a Georgetown University scholar arrested by ICE. A Virginia federal judge rejected the government's actions in the case of Dr. Badar Khan Suri. She ruled that Suri's First and Fifth Amendment rights were violated when he was seized by ICE agents back in March. Attorneys fighting for Dr. Suri's release spoke just a short time ago.
This is a historic moment in the sense that we heard federal judge today acknowledge very clearly from the bench how immigration laws were weaponized in this instance. And as Sophia argued and the judge agreed, here we had very clearly unstated, forget unproven, unstated allegations, and someone was held punitively, as the judge said, in under civil immigration charges for almost 60 days.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, great to be with you. A decisive ruling against the DOJ. What does this signal to you?
So I think we should be careful to say that it signals anything other than exactly what happened in this case. And this judge in this case was saying, yes, under immigration laws, the executive branch does have broad authority, but, and this is a big hold on, there are constitutional limitations. And we've seen this particular issue play out in a number of immigration cases where the administration says we have really broad authority, and those challenging the administration say, but not to use that authority in a way that violates either the First Amendment, meaning we can't target people based on the content of their speech without more, and the Fifth Amendment, meaning due process. We don't get to pick people off of the street and put them in detention centers without some sort of notice and opportunity to be heard. So we are fighting a lot right now between the power of the executive under immigration law and the limits on that power based on, again, the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment, speech and due process.
Okay, I want to lean into that a little bit here, Jessica, because there are other cases that are not exactly the same, but are very similar of people that are still being held by ICE. Will this decision have any impact on those cases moving forward?
So I do think that we need to be careful in the sense that every judge is going to look at each case separately. And we know that different judges, just like any other human being, have a different view of cases. Now, having said with all of those caveats, I think what we are seeing, if we want to try and glean some pattern, is that there are judges who are looking at the executive's actions and saying there are constitutional limitations. There are concerns about targeting people based on their speech. There are concerns about not giving people the process to which they are due. Do I think this now signals a psychological shift and judges will start ruling this way throughout the country? I just think we need to take each case as it comes.
Okay, well, speaking about another case that is similar but also very different, the arrest of a Wisconsin judge that brought protesters to the streets of Milwaukee. Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan has been indicted on obstruction charges for allegedly helping a man evade ICE authorities. Tomorrow, she's set to appear in court. Can you remind our viewers the circumstances of this case and what's expected to happen at that hearing?
Sure. So the circumstances, essentially, as you said, there was an individual in her courtroom who there was a misdemeanor charge that was being discussed. ICE agent showed up. She, and we're going based on reporting, I think said, let's move to, and then ask the parties, including this individual and his attorneys, to move to kind of a separate area in the courtroom where court staff can be. She also said to ICE agents something like, you need to speak with the Chief Justice, the Chief Judge. At that point, this individual leaves, tries to flee ICE. And the question is whether or not she did what she has the power to do as a judge, saying, I'm in control of my courtroom, we're pausing proceedings, go into the separate room, or if she was actively undermining the ICE agent's authority and trying to thwart their ability to proceed. And if she said, basically, go run out the back door. I know that sounds like a lengthy explanation, but I do think that this case is going to hinge on the specifics of the facts. The hearing tomorrow will be an arraignment. The charges will be read. She will respond. She will enter a plea of not guilty. There may be some scheduling issues that are discussed. I think that'll be about it.
Okay. Well, CBS News has also learned, Jessica, that federal judges nationwide are being targeted by what's known as pizza doxing. Basically, someone sending a pizza to their homes, but this is not a harmless prank. Many of them are coming with some veiled threats. What can be done in this case to protect judges?
Yeah, and I think it's worth emphasizing that this really does highlight the vulnerability of judges. Again, we've just spent a number of minutes talking about judges and the powers that they have and these high-profile rulings that they're making, and they're very controversial in some cases. Not everybody agrees with them, obviously. We know that in some of this pizza doxing, some of the pizzas have been ordered under apparently the name of a federal judge's son who was actually killed by somebody who was targeting the judge. All of which is to say these are very real threats. And obviously the Marshal Service is going to look into this. There's no perfect security system. There may be additional security for judges who are hearing particularly high profile cases. And certainly we've been here before. We've done that before. We've never been quite here before in terms of, in my view, kind of the breadth and depth of these threats.
Yeah, these are meant to be intimidating, and they are quite dangerous. Jessica Levinson, thank you so much. All right, let's take you to Capitol Hill now, where we are following several budget hearings happening right now. Meanwhile, the House committee in charge of all tax-related matters just wrapped up its overnight debate. It's passed a portion of a GOP budget plan aimed at advancing President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. It's one of 3 subcommittees that met on Tuesday to discuss the reconciliation package. Now, the other 2 are still ironing out other details over potential Medicaid cuts and a reduction in the SNAP program. House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke about the bill and how Democrats are impeding its progress. Take a listen.
We're going to slash taxes, including on tips, overtime, Social Security for seniors and job creators, restore American energy dominance, as you've heard, secure our border and deport illegal aliens. We're going to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, return to peace through strength, and reduce spending all at the same time. And as we're working to get this done, House Democrats are working overtime to deceive the American people about this. We've discussed it already this morning, but they're not talking about what the bill actually does. They're using talking points that are pretty stale. They're not afraid to lie about what's in it, and we're not afraid to tell the truth about what the Democrats are doing.
Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. Caitlin, I want to start with these committee meetings. We just received news that one of those committees attempted to adjourn, but then that motion was rejected. So what happened there?
Yeah, this has been a marathon of a day going into day 2 of these committee markups. The House Energy and Commerce Committee wanted to adjourn for really just a break, and that didn't pass. So they are continuing to go. They started yesterday, went through the night, and are continuing today. This is a key committee to watch, Liz, because this is the committee charged with finding those cuts or savings, as House Republican leadership would call it, to Medicaid and other social safety net programs. The big sticking points around that are how much to cut. The bill itself suggests strengthening the work requirements around qualifying for Medicaid, but there are other questions about what that will exactly look like. Basically, these committees are going through the process kind of line by line in the legislation to approve it and move it forward to the final House vote. Now, House Speaker Mike Johnson says that they are still on track to do that. In other words, get all the committees finished with their work, get the big, beautiful bill, as the president calls it, to the full House floor for a vote by next Friday before Memorial Day recess. That is a big uphill climb. The Speaker likes to say he doesn't like to be underestimated and has followed through with promises that he has made in terms of timeline. But there are some really key sticking points. I mean, chief among them is this squabble between moderate Republicans and more conservative Republicans over a specific state and local tax deduction known as SALT. There are several members from blue states that want a higher deduction available than what is currently written. And so they are trying to, and they represent high tax states, so they're trying to get that worked in. By and large, the bottom line is there are still lots of hurdles that need to be overcome in order to get this through to the full House vote. And then even then, you can't even talk about full passage until it gets through the Senate. And already on the Senate side, Republicans are expressing some disappointment and concerns about some of the text that they've seen so far.
Caitlin, I want to pivot now to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's got 2 testimonies today, or multiple testimonies today. We know he's asking for less money for his department. What can you tell us about his agenda today?
Yeah, and it's important to note that this is the first time that he has faced a congressional hearing since his confirmation hearing a couple of months ago. So this is part of the accountability process. Also, you're seeing a lot of cabinet secretaries up here on the Hill this week and last week because they are asking for money or budget approvals for their respective agencies. Now, HHS has delivered lots of cuts across the board, and there were a lot of questions in this hearing earlier today and another coming in the Senate this afternoon about those cuts. Kennedy said that he reinstituted some of the cuts. He was also asked about the uptick that we've seen in measles cases. He was asked point blank, do you think that people should get the vaccine? He said that, if it were me, I would, but I'm not one to give medical advice. So there is a certain layer of accountability that lawmakers up here wanted for Kennedy when they voted to confirm him, and we're seeing a little bit of that play out today.
And Caitlin, one last question. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem also at Capitol Hill for a budget hearing. But there's another issue she addressed involving Congress members at an ICE facility. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, over the weekend, a handful of Democratic lawmakers went to an ICE facility, a detention facility in New Jersey, and they had a skirmish with ICE officials there. Kristi Noem has called this unacceptable. The DOJ now is looking into an investigation into those lawmakers. Here's what Secretary Noem had to say about this in front of the committee today.
There were members of this very committee that took part in an action at Delaney Hall on May 9th that need to be addressed. I served as a member of Congress in this body for 8 years, and I understand the importance of congressional oversight. What happened on May 9th was not oversight. It was a political stunt that put the safety of our law enforcement officers, our agents, our staff, and our detainees at risk.
Now, there are some questions up here about whether there will be consequences for those members. House Speaker Mike Johnson said that there could be. They are just kind of working out what that actually may look like, whether it's a censure or something even more consequential. So we'll have to stay tuned for that.
Caitlin Hugh Burns live for us on Capitol Hill. Great to see you, Caitlin. Thanks so much. All right, we are looking live now at President Trump visiting at the palace of the Emir of Qatar. He is greeting people ahead of a state dinner on this second leg of his 3-stop trip to the Gulf. We're going to keep an eye on that. Well, coming up, the fighting in Gaza is intensifying, and Israel's prime minister says he has no intention of backing down. We're on the ground in the Middle East when we come back. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Our monitors shifting now to the Middle East, where President Trump is greeting people at the palace of the Emir of Qatar ahead of a state dinner there later on tonight. It's tonight there. This is the second leg of his 3-country tour in the Middle East. Now, before departing for that country, the president had a face-to-face meeting with the president of Syria, the new president, the first encounter between the two nations' leaders in 25 years. It also comes after Trump announced he'd lift sanctions in that country. So let's bring in CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Keeley. Courtney, are we likely going to see any real changes to come from that meeting?
Well, this is a real wait and see, but it is an extraordinary thing. And when President Trump announced that he would be meeting with al-Shaddad, when he announced the lifting of the sanctions, I was as surprised as anyone else. I did not see this coming personally as a reporter. And it's a momentous thing. So lifting American sanctions on Syria will open up business for a very impoverished nation that has suffered under not just the dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad, but before him, his father, Hafez al-Assad. So this has been the first window of opportunity for a new relationship for the U.S. and Syria in quite some time. But the question is, what are we going to see in the future from al-Shaddad? Now, Turkey and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is very keen on this, and President Trump has mentioned Erdogan in his speaking on aboard Air Force One about this. Turkey borders Syria. Turkey wants some of those economic deals of rebuilding this country. We do have to also see how it squares with Iran. The Saudi Arabians are really happy. And Trump is also saying that Syria is open to joining the Abraham Accords. And that's his big project, establishing deals and peace, not just economic, but peace. Here he is with the Emir of Qatar. This is the first U.S. presidential trip to Qatar, first head of state visit. So this is also, it was a big deal in Saudi with that purple carpet of royalty being laid out, that meeting with the Syrian president, and now moving on to Qatar, when sometimes the Saudis and the Qataris have not seen eye to eye many times. This smoothing of relationships by President Trump really in his element. Leaving out Israel, though, we have to see where that's going to head in that relationship in the coming days.
Yeah, it's interesting, Courtney. I mean, could this visit really impact Syria's relationship with Israel? They've been left out of this diplomacy trip, at least for now. Lots of things could happen in the coming days, obviously. But Israel was very much against lifting those sanctions on Syria. So how does that square with the relationship within these three countries?
Well, there was a dusty old peace deal that never came to fruition in the late 90s called the Syrian-Israel peace deal. It didn't happen. They are arch enemies throughout history. Can there be some sort of meeting of the minds? And when al-Shaddad came in, and when he was with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and he came in with that rebel group, and Bashar al-Assad fled, Israel has been launching airstrikes in Syria throughout these recent months on military complexes for their own security, for not rebel groups, but former Assad loyalists that say to protect this minority group of Druze who are secretive sect and offshoot of Islam, but a very big community in the region, and mostly in the Golan Heights and that border or Israel and Syria. So Israel is not ready for any kind of olive branch overture, but they are watching closely, and we'll have to see what will be said, mainly behind closed doors. Probably we know that Ron Dermer has been in Qatar too, and they are engaging in trying to get the ceasefire in Gaza moving forward. That's not moving forward with Israel. So there's a lot of chatter that have to happen, and will happen behind closed doors, but we'll have to watch Israel and the government and Netanyahu and see what they say about all of this, because things are moving so fast right now.
Yeah, and also the president teased an announcement on Russia and Ukraine today. What did he say about that, and what role does Qatar play in those negotiations?
Right. So Russia has had its hand in power as a power broker in the Middle East, mainly in Syria until Bashar al-Assad fled, and they have a naval base there and a port. Russia is still trying to make sure that they're not losing a toehold in the region or on these waterways, and it was announced recently that there would be talks to establish a ceasefire to move towards peace in Ukraine in Istanbul tomorrow. Again, fast moving, because I was just talking to an editor about what we expect to see, but we should be ready for anything. President Trump is laying it out, like I said, in this kind of epic peace dealing way, this economic way, but what will be the monetary value of some of these agreements, the real monetary value, and what will be the real security value coming out of these agreements. So not just the Middle East on the table, not just the Saudis, not just the Iranians, but here we go in Istanbul tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State will be in Ankara. So lots more to talk about, a lot of moving parts, very big changes in the Middle East and elsewhere. We'll have to see what happens by the end of the week. It's going to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, be ready for anything. I like that. Courtney Keeley, thank you so much. Well, Israel's military has stepped up airstrikes across the Gaza Strip. Gaza rescuers say 80 people have been killed today just by Israeli airstrikes. This is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that there was, quote, no way to stop the fighting until the Hamas militant group is defeated. CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata has more from Tel Aviv.
Israel has intensified its war in Gaza. Overnight, the Israel Defense Forces unleashed a wave of strikes in Khan Yunis. This devastating aftermath was captured by a CBS cameraman who was also slightly injured while filming it. Body after body lay along the street. The IDF says the attacks were directed at a senior Hamas target. And there is speculation in the local media here that it may have been Mohammed Sinwar, the de facto head of Hamas and the brother of Yahya Sinwar, who was killed by Israel in October last year. There has been no official confirmation of this, and our crew also filmed again in the area this morning and saw what looked like a network of tunnels that had been hit, but they had to leave the area as more strikes were coming in. Back to you.
Deborah, thank you so much. Well, one state just gave a major insurance company the green light to hike rates for homeowners. We'll break that down for you coming up next on CBS News 24/7. Let's take a live look out at San Antonio, Texas, where an intense heat wave is gripping much of the Lone Star State, with record high temperatures expected throughout the day. CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca brings us the very latest from San Antonio.
Large parts of Central and South Texas are under an extreme heat warning. We're talking triple-digit temperatures, and the feels-like temperature will be much higher than that. And that's why cities and communities around here are telling people to be aware of this early heat snap. Now, usually this is something that starts around June, July, continues through August, but it's starting a little bit earlier. And the frequency and intensity of these heat episodes is because of climate change, and people are having to adapt to that. One way they're doing that, they're always heading out early. You have people out walking early, getting their steps, taking the dog out early, just so it's not really oppressive out there when they're in the heat. We're expecting the temperatures to kind of start really being noticeable around 1 o'clock local time. That's when we're going to start seeing triple digits. And this heat wave will continue. And of course, this close to summer, folks in San Antonio and South Texas and this part of the country really are used to it. They know what to do. They know to hydrate. They know that if they need a break from the heat, they should take it. Find shade. The city has cooling centers and libraries open, so if people need to go in there and get out of the heat, they can. Interesting note, though, a concern here in Texas is always the power grid. And talking to some experts, they're pretty good with the power grid right now. They're thinking that it'll be able to handle this heat snap, but it's a good reminder for the coming summer months that the heat is here and it will be brutal. Back to you.
So much extreme weather that we've been talking about all day today, Jess. We're talking about storms, and then now in Texas, the extreme heat. This seems early for this kind of heat.
And it really is. We're still in the spring months. It's June 20th. That's the first day of summer. Yeah. That's usually when we're gearing up for those triple-digit numbers down into Texas. But this has been record-breaking for millions of people down there, and we're not done with the heat just yet. Diving into this weekend's forecast, there's a couple things that I want to know. Of course, we're still dealing with triple-digit heat today over in areas like San Antonio, Texas, Dallas, Texas. Let's zoom into some of these communities here. That heat stretches its way all the way up into Kansas City, Minneapolis, and all the way over into Chicago, too, with well above average temperatures heading into this afternoon. And the reason why, well, there's this huge area of high pressure that's just circulating throughout these communities, leaving temperatures above average, giving us these sunny skies, and of course, this summer-like weather in the forecast, too. So today alone, areas from Austin over into Houston, Waco, and all the way up into Oklahoma City, we could see potential record highs into the afternoon hours today, and we're already starting to feel that heat now. It was a good idea this morning to take the dogs on a long walk, because now we're heating up significantly, anywhere up to around 20 degrees above average today alone in areas like Oklahoma City, down into San Antonio. And that heat stretches up into places like Minnesota, too, that just yesterday we were dealing with red flag warnings, and now we're still holding on to that heat. But the good news is there's some storms pushing to the north that will cool them back down. The Dakotas, for example, sitting below average as we head into the coming days, but those storms don't stretch all the way south. We're still above average anywhere from Dallas all the way up into Memphis, Tennessee, and everywhere in between as we head into this weekend's forecast. So well above average temperatures for now. We'll see some relief inside as we head into next week, but those storms up north are actually going to help out a lot when it comes to cooling us off. Back to you.
All right, Jess, thank you so much. California just gave State Farm the green light to hike homeowners insurance rates. State Farm made the request to boost rates in the wake of the LA area wildfires. Yesterday, the state insurance commissioner allowed the company to hike home insurance premiums by 17%. Now, earlier this year, the Eaton and Palisades fires destroyed a combined 16,000 buildings and damaged many more. Now, the company says the cost has left them in a dire financial situation. State Farm had initially asked to increase rates by over 21%. We could see these changes as soon as June 1st. Well, a new study finds most Americans don't earn enough money to afford the basic costs of living. This comes from the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity. Their analysis looked beyond whether people can afford food and shelter. Instead, they also considered the need to pay for things like higher education, health care, and child care costs. It found that for the bottom 60% of U.S. households, a minimum quality of life is out of reach. And student loan delinquencies spiked in the first few months of the year. That's according to a new report from the New York Federal Reserve. It comes after the Education Department ended a 5-year pause on reporting late payments. Now, in the first quarter of 2024, less than 1% of loans were reported as delinquent, meaning that they hadn't been paid for more than 90 days. But in the first quarter of this year, that number surged to almost 8%. Delinquent borrowers could see their credit reports take a hit and be sent to collections. Now, when someone named Sinner comes to the Vatican, it's no surprise that even the Pope is making a few jokes about it. The meeting between a tennis star and a Pope that loves the sport of tennis. That's coming up.
Don't do that!
Oh, this is scary. Video out of Houston shows you exactly how you should not tow a car. A sedan with a driver sitting behind the wheel to steer was swinging dangerously across multiple lanes on a highway while also being towed by an SUV. This happened on Monday. You can see the other cars on the road slowing down to try to avoid that car. That was really scary. Well, our social media team has more great content like this on our TikTok and Instagram, so please follow us at the handle CBS News. Okay, check this out. There's a driver speeding off a dock in New York, and he got a very lucky break. Whoa, look at that thing just plunge. The car broke through the barrier and then fell down, but instead of plunging into the water, it landed on top of a floating dock. This happened in Brookhaven on Long Island this Monday. The town supervisor says you can chalk the whole thing up to the driver being inexperienced. Inexperienced, but very lucky it did not go into the water. Well, the fire department posted these pictures of a very challenging tow operation to get that car off the dock. They wrote that the driver had accidentally crashed while driving through a parking lot. Amazingly, they had minor injuries and was checked out at the hospital, but otherwise okay. Well, college graduates are busy wrapping up the term year with finals and graduations and all the fun events there. But the Naval Academy has its own unique tradition for the new class, and it looks a little bit like this. This is really unusual. Here they're building a human pyramid to remove the Dixie cup that's at the top of that monument there. That cup will be replaced with an upperclassman's hat. Some fun facts about this climb, though. The monument stands at 21 feet and is covered by vegetable oil. Okay. The class of 1962 holds the record for the fastest climb at 12 minutes. I got to know how they did it. The class in 1998 took the longest at over 4 hours. That I can believe. That's because the cup was actually glued and taped down as a prank. Oh, that's just mean. All right, well, Pope Leo XIV met a sinner at the Vatican today, but rather than absolve someone of their sins, this meeting was all about tennis. Tennis star Jannik Sinner brought his rackets with him to the Vatican City. Take a look.
In Wimbledon mi lascerebbe.
The Pope is a big tennis player. This was a fun meeting. Sinner, as you know, the top-ranked tennis player in the world, had an audience with a newly elected Pope today. He is competing in the Italian Open and was invited to the Vatican on an off day. As we mentioned, Pope Leo, big tennis fan, and calls himself quite the amateur player. That's his quote. Earlier this week, he joked that he would play in a charity match as long as Sinner wasn't on the other side of the net. I want to see the Pope play. That'll be really interesting.